Hi there, welcome to Farm Bread. I'm Kate. Using your ANKARSRUM Mixer can save you a lot of time, but it can also save your hands. Last week, I made a large batch of sourdough using the ANKARSRUM Mixer with the dough hook. It's amazing because of its large capacity and the power to handle large batches. I know there are times when you just want to make one single loaf and you just want to get the things done quickly. So today I'm going to show you just how easy it can be to make one single loaf using your ANKARSRUM Mixer. Welcome to Farm Bread. I'm Kate and I make simple, delicious artisan breads here on our little backyard farm. Making bread doesn't need to be complicated. Do not overthink it. Trust your instincts, take some risks, and have fun in the process. And always remember, beauty is in the eye of the beholder. Today I'm going to be using my standard sourdough recipe for just a regular simple sourdough loaf. What's really nice about it is you can build on it. So if you're going to be home all day, you can add in some extra folds and stretching. Sometimes I'll make a batch before I go to work. So I pretty much make it in the morning and then leave it for the bulk rise throughout the day. It really depends on you, but this is really a great go-to recipe for baking a simple sourdough. All right, let's get started. So first things first, to make it easier on all of us, I am just gonna take the bowl off of my ANKARSRUM and set it on top of a scale. So I'm gonna add all of my ingredients into my bowl using the scale, measuring them out that way. And then once it comes to mixing the ingredients and blending it together into a nice ball, I'm gonna use the mixer for that. Okay, I'm going to zero out my scale using grams, and I'm just going to be measuring out 50 grams of my starter. I will zero my scale out again, and I'm going to add 365 milliliters of lukewarm room temperature water. I'm going to stir these together just to mix the starter and the water before I add my salt and my flour. This is what I would normally do when I'm mixing by hand. Now I will add my flour. So 500 grams of a high protein bread flour. And lastly, I'm just going to be adding about 10 grams of pink Himalayan salt. And now I'm just going to mix these ingredients together as well using my Danish dough whisk. This is all stuff that you would normally do with your hands anyways, but I feel like it helps the ingredients come together a little bit better before I put it on the mixer. So I'm just going to do that. Scrape it off here. Now I'm going to lift this up and put it onto my mixer with the dough hook. So now I have the bowl on my mixer. I'm going to add in my knife, the dough knife. And the dough hook. Now we're all set up. I'm going to turn my mixer on. And so this just helped the dough come together a lot faster in the mixer instead of me trying to get all the ingredients to start to come together. By mixing it with the Danish dough whisk at first really quickly for 30 seconds, it really helps this to speed up this process. Now we're just mixing everything together. And you can see how nicely the dough is moving around the hook. So really using the ANKARSRUM for a single batch is absolutely fine. There's no problem. We'll just make sure that everything is evenly incorporated. Again, I'm looking to make sure there are no dry areas versus wet areas. Everything looks pretty even. And once I feel like we're at a good spot, I'm just going to turn it off and let it rest. This is a little bit of a higher hydration, which in my opinion works really nicely with the dough hook. So when you have that higher hydration dough, the hook works really well in stretching it. If you have a lower hydration dough, the dough roller works really well. I think this looks really good. So I'm just going to turn this off and let this rest for about 30 minutes. I'm going to cover this with a damp cloth, let it rest for 30 minutes, and then I'll come back and then we can do what I would typically do with my hands, but just kind of shape this into more of a ball. You'll see how the dough comes together a little bit nicer. The glutens have rested, and it will start to look like an actual dough. Okay, we are back. I let my dough rest for about 30 minutes, just enough time to go out to the chickens and feed them on this cold, wintry day. All right, so take a good look at what the dough looks like right now after it's rested. And now I'm going to turn the machine on low speed. What I love is watching the dough come together at this first stretch, if you will. I'll just let this run for anywhere 30 seconds to maybe a minute, just so that I can see the dough moving around. As you can see, it's moving on the bottom. On the top, it doesn't look like it's doing as much, but it really is. And so it's a very gentle stretch and pull. You may be wondering what this dough knife is doing, but it actually is working with the dough hook. So I always leave the dough knife in when I'm doing this. All right, I do think this is coming together really nicely. So I am about to turn the machine off, and I'm going to let this rest for about an hour, and then I will come back and do a first set of stretch and folds. As I mentioned, you don't have to do that, but since I'm going to be here today, I have the day off, I am going to stay, and I'm going to be able to come back and do a couple sets of stretch and folds. All right. Now, because I have my hook in here, it's not something where I can put the lid on. So again, I'm just going to lay a damp cloth over top. In fact, I might just kind of pull it up around the dough knife like so. And I'm just going to cover the dough this way for now, and I'll be back in about 1 to 2 hours. The timer just went off, and I have had my dough sitting for about 90 minutes. So now I'm just going to come back in and do a quick, what would normally be a stretch and fold by hand. I'm just going to do a quick stretching with the mixer. You can see how the glutens are really starting to relax. The dough's really coming together nicely. While this is doing this, I'm gonna wet my cloth again so that I can put a wet cloth over top as soon as it's done and ready. All right, beautiful. Just going to leave the mixer and the dough hook and knife actually in my dough. I'm gonna cover this with my wet towel or damp towel again. I have a lot of moisture in here just because I don't want it to dry out at all. So it is pretty damp. And I'm going to let this sit for another couple of hours, and then I'll come back and do another stretching with the dough. I have let my dough rest for about 2 hours. So now I am going to do one more set of stretching and folds. So I'm just going to turn this on low. I'm actually going to take my hook and knife out, and I'm just going to let my dough rest for the remainder of the bulk rise. So I'm going to turn it off. Take my dough knife out. The hook. And I'll just quickly go in here and do a quick fold. You don't need to do this. You can just let your dough just rest in a ball, but I'm just gonna kind of fold it into a small little ball, and this is how we will let it rise. I'm going to let this rise for about 6 hours. It's winter time, the house is cooler, so I'll let it rise for about 6 hours, and then I will come back and we will proof it and get it ready for the bake. So now that my dough has entered the bulk rise, I actually took it off the ANKARSRUM Mixer and I placed it on top of my stove. I like to use any warmth from lights that's coming in the kitchen because it's pretty cold out and it's really chilly in the house too. So any extra warmth that you can utilize to help your dough during a bulk rise, use it. It's a great way to be a little bit more efficient with your bread making. Welcome back. It has been about 6.5 hours. We have let our dough sit out all day. And now we are going to turn it out onto a floured surface. And I'm gonna let it rest a little bit. And then we will put it in our proofing basket for its final proof. Just gonna sprinkle with flour. Gently pull this out onto our floured surface. Okay. Just going to give it a little bit of a fold before I do any shaping. Okay, I'm just gonna let it rest for a minute. While I'm letting this rest for a few minutes before I really start shaping it, I'm just gonna gently flour my proofing basket. Okay, I just let this rest for a little bit, a few minutes. Now I'm going to tighten the shape. A few. And because I use oval clay bakers or oval cloches, I always use a oval proving basket. So that's why I'm shaping my dough into this oval type shape. So you'll just want to make sure that you're shaping your dough appropriately for whichever baker that you're going to be using. All right. I love the feeling of dough. So soft. All right. Now I am just going to pick this up. I'm going to use a bench scraper to help, and I'm going to flip it over and put it into my proofing basket upside down. Okay. Sometimes I'll just scrape up this other flour that didn't get utilized and just sprinkle it on top, because when we put this into the clay baker, we're going to be flipping it over, and that way it will help so that there's no sticking. There shouldn't be, but just in case. So now I'm going to cover this up, and I'm going to let it rest for about an hour for its final proof. Sometimes I like to put this on the stove as well, especially in the wintertime when the temperatures are a little bit cooler in my house. I will put it over on my stove with a cloth over top, and that just kind of helps expedite things as well. Cute little bunnies. And don't forget, you're going to want to preheat your oven to 450 about a half an hour from now during this final proof, and make sure that you put your clay baker into your oven when you do that. Our bread has been proofing for just over an hour, and the oven is now preheated to 450 degrees. So what I'm going to do is take my cloche out of the oven, put it up here, and we're going to pour our dough into the oven. All right, and as a special treat, I wanted to try and do a stencil, because sometimes it's a little bit fun. Let me see if I can rotate this for you to try something different. And since we only have one loaf, it makes it a little bit easier. So I'm going to pour my dough in here. And now my dough's a little bit soft. I'm just going to spray it. And just stencil with flour. Get a little pretty design. And then what we can do is take our lamb. I think someone had told me it's pronounced lamb, which makes a lot more sense. Just do a little slit. This is not did not have the cold ferment at all, so it's got to be very, very gentle. All right, I'm going to put the lid on. Put our loaf in the oven. Okay, now I'm going to bake this for 20 minutes covered, and then I will take the lid off and let it bake for another 30 minutes. All right, I'll see you in 20 minutes. All right, our timer just went off, so I'm about to take off, careful hun, take off the lid. And I'm going to, oh wow, you can really see the beautiful stencil. I just took the lid off the loaf. It's looking amazing. You can really see the stencil showing up nicely. Without the lid, we're going to bake it for another 30 minutes. So in about 30 minutes, we'll come back and I'll show you the finished product. That is looking beautiful, and I love the stencil. Take it out. You see? Isn't that beautiful? See how nice that stencil shows up? It's such a pretty thing to incorporate. Great. So now I am going to let this cool. It is late, so we're actually going to go to bed, and I will open it up in the morning and show you how it looks on the inside, give you a look at the crumb. Good morning, welcome back. So we have let our beautiful loaf rest overnight, got a good night's sleep, and now we are back, and I will cut into our loaf for you. Okay. All right, first I'm just gonna rotate this so you can see that beautiful stencil. It's super easy to do, and it's really fun, especially if you're gonna be giving these loaves as gifts to anyone, or having them over the holidays or special occasions. I find that it's such a nice treat to deliver a loaf with a fun stencil. All right, here is our beautiful crumb. Yes, we do have a few air bubbles in there, a few large ones, but it is not going to affect the flavor at all. It's not going to win an award, but this is a beautiful loaf of sourdough. It's going to taste amazing. I am not worried at all about that. And you saw how simple it was to create. So just keep that in mind. It might not be your perfect loaf of bread, but it is a great loaf of bread. And it's doable within your schedule with the ANKARSRUM. So if you're having any issues with your hands, cramping up, anything like that, and you really need another option to folding by hand and stretching by hand, then I highly recommend trying the ANKARSRUM for this. And honestly, you saw how simple it was to create. I really didn't have multiple sets of stretch and folds. Any additional thing like that that you add to it is going to enhance your loaf. I kept it really simple and basically fit it into my schedule yesterday. And so to have a beautiful loaf of bread like this after that is great for me. So I hope you try it out. I hope you enjoy it. And if you are liking and enjoying this content, please subscribe, like. If you have any questions, post them in the comments below. I'm always happy to hear your thoughts and your feedback. And it really helps motivate me and allows me to understand what content to make for you. If you can post any things that you have questions on, I'd be happy to make a video about it. So thanks for tuning in on my bread journey here at FARMBREAD. It's really fun to experiment and be able to share my results with you. So I will see you in the next video. And then I'm gonna take a bite. All right, here we go. I don't know about you, but I love Havarti with dill. All right. You want a bite?